So have you heard about the United States Department of Agriculture?
Never heard of it. What is the Department of Agriculture?
The Department of Agriculture is a branch of the federal government that oversees food and agriculture. One of their jobs is to look out for the American farmer.
How do they look out for farmers?
They can try to keep the price of grain high.
And how do they do that?
One way is with a Conservation Reserve Program, known as CRP. CRP pays farmers not to plant crops in their fields.
Really?
Yes. In government fiscal year 2009, there were 33.7 million acres enrolled in CRP, at a cost of $1.7 billion.
So what happens when the farmers don't plant crops?
Supply goes down, so the price of grain goes up.
If the price of grain goes up, doesn't that mean the price of food goes up too?
Yes.
Is that a good thing?
It depends who you ask. The farmers sure like it. But the parents who work hard to put food on the table will not agree. And keep in mind, there are more parents than there are farmers.
Okay, so won't farmers want to grow more if the prices are higher?
Farmers will want to plant more crops if the prices are higher, yes. And get this. Not all of the corn grown in the United States is used to make food. Only 60% is used in food production.
Where does the other 40% go?
The rest of the corn is used to make ethanol.
What is ethanol?
Ethanol is a fuel made from plants, primarily sugarcane and corn.
How do they use the ethanol?
They mix the ethanol with gasoline.
Why do they mix ethanol with gasoline?
Because they say ethanol is clean-burning renewable energy.
Why do they want the renewable energy?
To reduce the dependence on foreign oil.
Why do they want to reduce the dependence on foreign oil?
According to the Department of Energy, depending on foreign oil puts the United States at risk for trade deficits, supply disruption, and price changes. It also puts money in the pockets of unstable countries who may or may not be fans of the United States.
How does ethanol reduce dependence on foreign oil?
Remember when I said ethanol is blended with gas? Well, these days most gas in the United States contains 10% ethanol. There is also E85, which is 85% ethanol. Because our gas contains ethanol, in theory, we don't need to import as much oil. And because ethanol is made mostly from corn grown in the United States, it is considered domestic production of fuel.
Ethanol sounds all right.
The ethanol producers like it because the federal government subsidizes the production of ethanol with a tax credit of 45 cents per gallon. And the farmers benefit from higher corn prices.
How much tax revenue does the government forgo on these tax credits?
According to the Congressional Budget Office, $5.2 billion in 2009.
Wow. Okay, and why are the corn prices higher?
The blending of ethanol with gas has become federal law, so ethanol producers require more corn to make the ethanol, thus creating new demand for corn. Price moves in lockstep with demand, so when demand goes up, prices go up too.
How much do corn prices go up?
Well, take the one-year period from April 2007 through April 2008. The price of corn went up roughly 50%. That is 50. The Congressional Budget Office estimates somewhere between 30 and 45% of the increase is due to ethanol driving demand. You also need to know that the U.S. corn supply rose by 16% over the same time period. That's an important fact to keep in mind. More recently, corn reached an all-time high on April 7, 2011.
You have established that corn prices have gone up in part because of ethanol. I understand. What about the price of food?
For the same time period, April 07 through April 08, a consumer price index for food went up by 5 percentage points. Somewhere between 10 and 15% of this increase is because ethanol production is driving up demand and prices for corn. And here's the kicker. The federal government funds several food assistance programs. The levels of funding are linked to a food price index, like the one I mentioned earlier. When the index goes up, funding goes up. When the index went up in 2009, the CBO attributed an incremental $600 to $900 million of spending due to the increased demand for corn used to make ethanol.
Why are you quoting statistics that are so old?
Because that is the most recently released data on the subject.
2-year-old data? Not brilliant.
Hey, it's all I have to work with.
Okay, back to corn. At first we talked about the CRP program, where the government pays farmers not to plant their fields.
This is correct.
Then we talked about the subsidies paid to produce ethanol and how this drives the planting of more corn.
Yes.
So the government spends billions of dollars to get farmers not to plant their fields, and at the same time, they spend billions more on an energy policy that encourages the planting of more corn. Demand goes up, supply goes up, and the price of food goes up, which causes the government to spend hundreds of millions more on the food assistance programs.
Yes.
So how do you know if ethanol is really a benefit to the United States? It seems some people benefit from it, but others do not. And what about using sugarcane from South America? Why don't you use more sugarcane? Why don't you explore more domestic reserves? Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico come to mind. And doesn't Canada, your friendly and stable neighbor, have a ton of oil? Why aren't you looking to Canada for more oil?
These are all great questions that will have to be answered later. But, as the Zen master says, we'll see.